I'll explain the first film, The Super Bodyguard aka Iron Protector, today. At the start of the movie, the main character, Wu Lin, is shown. He is approached by a small boy who proceeds to tease him. Wu Lin teaches splits on the streets. The boy is mocking him while holding an ice cream cone. He's also teasing him, making various funny facial angles. He brings the ice cream against Wu Lin's face. Later, we see many thugs come and be careless of the child. They throw his ice cream down. The child begins to cry. Wu Lin, who was showing splits, stands up from his place. He goes to chase those thugs. They've captured a businessman and want to kill him. Later, comes to them and inquires as to who has kept the foot on the child's ice cream. These thugs don't tell him anything, and they start fighting. Wu Lin always knows how to deal with these thugs. He kills 15 thugs by himself. No one could stand a chance against his powerful flying kicks and punches. He fights all of the thugs on his own, and in the end, he is the only one who survives. Mr. Li, the businessman, thanks Wu Lin for saving his life. Mr. Li wishes to reward him and keeps a number amount in front of him, but he disregards it and walks away. Wu Lin approaches the boy once more, who teases him, saying, "Whatever you're doing, I can do as well." Later, a number of black cars belonging to the mafia group surrounded him. When the mafia group's leader approaches him, he reveals that he is a childhood friend. We see them together in the next scene, refreshing their memories. Wu Lin's friend inquires about Kung Fu, who used to train them. Where does he go? Wu Lin informs him that he has died and displays his ashes. Wu Lin's friend begins to cry when he learns that his master has died. Wu Lin's friend reminds him that he had stolen his master's iron shoes. As a result, his master left him. Along with this, we meet Mr. Fu, the leader of another gang. He murders his own man as a result of deception. Mr. Li, on the other hand, visits Wu Lin, whose life he has saved. After he arrives, he informs Wu Lin that he requires a bodyguard for his daughter. Wu Lin's friend tells him that Mr. Li wants to hire him as his daughter's bodyguard. "Are you willing?" He agrees, and Mr. Li takes a promise from him that you'll go to any length to safeguard my daughter. Mr. Li's daughter is at a nightclub, where she is being teased by other people. Meanwhile, Mr. Li arrives and separates the crowd from her daughter. One of the thugs tried to kidnap his daughter, but Wu Lin comes and begins to fight with these thugs. When Mr. Li's daughter learns that he is her personal bodyguard, she claims that "I'm going to give you twice as much money. Don't be my bodyguard, leave this." But Wu Lin, who is the man of principle, he claims that "I don't require money and that I will rather perform my duties." Wu Lin then takes the girl to a shopping center in the next scene. He comes upon a spoiled boy who has been mistreating another girl. This girl slaps him across the face and adds, "Wu Lin asked me to do that." Wu Lin denies it when this boy asks. And the boy is accompanied by a large number of other boys. They've all started chasing the girl, whose protection Wu Lin is responsible for. The girl's name is Fei Fei and those boys are chasing her. Wu Lin, on the other hand, does not help her. Instead, he helps her after Fei Fei apologizes to him. Wu Lin scares them and pushes them aside. Fei Fei's life was saved in this way. The next scene shows Wu Lin and Fei Fei in a restaurant. Fei Fei was having a good time, but Wu Lin was looking about to see if there was any danger. Meanwhile, a waitress arrives, and Wu Lin notices that something is wrong. He captures the waitress and takes Fei Fei away from this area. Many thugs attack them, which he fights and saves Fei Fei from. Wu Lin was fighting them alone. It was quite difficult for him, but he doesn't lose his spirit. While he fights with them, a man takes Fei Fei into the car by holding her hand. They were trying to take her away, and Wu Lin confronted them. He chases after their car, and we see them trying to kidnap Fei Fei. He fights them. He rushes in front of their car and saves Fei Fei by jumping onto the car. Fei Fei is now extremely impressed by him. Wu Lin wonders why your father has so many enemies who wish to kidnap you. Fei Fei was quiet, but she didn't tell him because she doesn't know anything. She informs him that she is used to a sense of security. The bodyguards used to hire for her always since her childhood. We see Wu Lin's friend who is talking to Mr. Fu. Mr. Fu assigns Wu Lin's friend a target and says, "I hope you wouldn't disappoint me." Actually, he was assigned to capture Wu Li and his daughter. In the next scene, we see Wu Lin practicing iron feet. He has these skills from his master. While practicing, he reminds that how he used to practice with his friend. Now that he has concentrated on his practice enough, he can understand that the man who attacked them was one of his friend's men. The next day, he meets with his friend, who advises him against protecting Mr. Li's daughter. "You don't need to be their bodyguard now." He informs him that the steel factory has been converted into a training base. You'll teach the students how to use the steel shoes. But Wu Lin rejects to agree with his friend and his friend becomes ragged. He challenges him to a fight. Wu Lin fights with his friend and defeats his friend with his fighting skills. Finally, he defeats his friend, and Wu Lin's friend tears a piece of his cloth. He tells Wu Lin that we're no more brothers from today. Later, Wu Lin goes to Fei Fei and takes her away from the city. She asks, "Why are you taking me outside the city?" He tells her that you're in danger. A deadly mafia group is chasing you down. They both go away to spend time with one another. They were hiding from the gang at the time. We see Wu Lin teaching Iron Feet to Fei Fei. Fei Fei, on the other hand, teaches him how to drive a car. Wu Lin tells Fei Fei thought these shoes weigh 25 kilograms. He is learning a skill through a technique so that he can put it to good use. Meanwhile, we encounter Wu Lin's friend who recalls him of the day when he was eating garbage. Mr. Fu has helped him and has made him his man. Mr. Fu, who has captured Mr. Li, is later seen. Mr. Li and Mr. Fu used to work together in the past. Mr. Fu is a ruthless and selfish man who murdered his own wife. He intends to capture Fei Fei after capturing Mr. Li. Mr. Fu tells Wu Lin's friend to capture Wu Lin. Wu Lin's friend, on the other hand, believes that his men are incapable of arresting Wu Lin. As a result, they'll employ chains to apprehend Wu Lin. Later, Wu Lin's friend arrives to apprehend Fei Fei. They've heard the news that they're on their way. From there, Wu Lin is aware that the mafia has arrived. As a result, he escapes right away, taking Fei Fei with him. They were fleeing into the jungle, but one of Wu Lin's friend's men notices them. Wu Lin's friend's men attack them, and Fei Fei was severely beaten after being tied. They were taken to the storage room. Wu Lin wants to fight them in the storage room in order to save Fei Fei. Meanwhile, his feet were trapped in the chains that had been placed there willingly. He was being attacked by a large number of people, and he was battling them alone. Because he was alone and there were so many people, it was an unfair fight. Fighting with chains was quite difficult for him. Fei Fei was likewise tied there with ropes. He becomes emotional when he sees her and attempts to fight them again. Despite the fact that he was enslaved and lost, his companion leaves him in the far forests. He was buried alive in a big trench dug in the forest. They were gone, but he was still alive. They were thinking of him dead. He goes straight to Fei Fei's house, where he changes his shoes and his face. Later, he heads straight to his headquarters, where Fei Fei and Mr. Li have been captured. The warriors were already waiting for him when he arrived. Wu Lin flies them all as they rush towards him. Despite being alone, he fights them by breaking their legs one by one. He was defeating them. He enters the headquarters after defeating them. He finds the group that defeated him previously after arriving there. He was more powerful this time, and his kick was killing everyone. He dashes to the headquarters, where Mr. Li and his daughter are being held captive. He discovers that Mafia Fu's leader is actually his father. Later in the film, we see a flashback scene in which Mr. Li and Mr. Fu were business partners, but Mr. Fu murdered Mr. Li's wife because she was a police officer, after all. In addition, Mr. Fu's fate teller told you that your son is wonderful. His combat speed is impressive. He was told by the fate teller that whoever stood in front of him would be killed. He now trusts the fortune teller and throws his son from the highest peaks. Now, we come to the present where Wu Lin's friend is ready to fight him. Both use the same techniques to defeat each other. Finally, Wu Lin wins and breaks his friend's legs. Wu Lin's friend wasn't his friend but his enemy. When Wu Lin stands up, one of Mr. Fu's assistants shoots him. He rushes towards the assistant after seeing this, but the bullet hits him on the left side. Everyone believes that the bullet struck his heart and that he would die as a result. He survives, though, since his heart is on the right side of his body. He eventually defeats the assistant and captures his father. He wants to murder him and attack him, but there is no way he could kill his father. After a few months, we encounter the scene again. Mr. Li died as a result of cancer in its 4th stage, we learned.